Good afternoon.
I am Miko.
I'm Miko.
Now I'm Miko. You are Anita.
Good afternoon.
Boa tarde. For those of you that are new to our channel, I'm Miko and I'm Portuguese.
And I'm Anita and I'm English. In this video, we're going to tell you about how we came to buy this house and a few of the mistakes that we managed to avoid along the way. We're not going to give you a definitive guide to the buying process in Portugal because there's lots of other great videos out there where you can find all of that information. But some of the things we're going to talk about happened to us. We managed to short-term rent a few places. We found accommodation in the Algarve. We stayed for a while in the centre of Portugal, and we also visited the north. Luckily for us, we weren't in a rush to buy a property. And in fact, our house in the UK was rented out. So it gave us the opportunity to travel around, discover different areas, and see where we really felt comfortable being. So at first, we used the normal estate agents to look for properties. We only had a limited budget. Our budget was €200,000, and that would need to include the first couple of years whilst we were searching, living costs, travel expenses, renting short-term accommodation, etc. I was interested in characterful properties, and Amilcar really had a focus on the land. He really wanted the land because at the time we were considering having animals or a garden centre or just growing crops. In fact, Amilcar was prepared to live in a tent whilst we developed an old ruin, but that wasn't for me, I'm afraid. Eventually, an estate agent showed us a house that seemed to fit the bill perfectly. It was within our budget, it was detached, it was isolated, and it was relatively modern. We'd been told that this particular property had all the correct documents, it was legal, it had a habitation license, and so we felt fairly confident that we would go ahead. So because we loved that house, we were about to put down a deposit. Whilst we were waiting, we started to think something wasn't quite right, such as why was it not connected to municipal water and why was it in the middle of agricultural fields? So we thought we'd make some inquiries of our own and went to the local camera or town hall. And there we managed to get to speak to somebody. And strangely enough, they were already aware of this particular house. And guess what? It had no habitation license. And it was an absolute shock to us, thinking actually we could have lost our deposit, because the rule in Portugal is once a deposit's been paid by the purchaser, and if they pull out of the transaction, then they'll lose that deposit. We hadn't got a solicitor involved, but luckily we had done these initial checks to see about the habitation license. For the most part, houses are advertised with estate agents, but it is possible for private vendors to advertise on Idealista. There are other ways too. As you're travelling around, particularly in the countryside, you'll often come across a private sign. We've contacted several potential houses for viewing this way. The advantage is that you're likely to be doing it from an area you already like and you've seen the place from the outside. In one of the houses that had a private sale sign, we were shown around by someone who had keys to several other properties. We had a great afternoon looking around at several houses, but you have got to keep your wits about you, because one of the properties that he showed us, it transpired as we were walking around that it was actually only a share that was being sold. It had multiple owners and only one of the owners was offering their share for sale. Of course, it's highly unlikely it would have ever led to a sale in our case, because there are so many hurdles that you have to jump through the buying process that I'm sure it would have transpired anyway. But I think the main thing is it could have been a complete waste of time had we not also been viewing the other properties. We quickly forgot that one, and it's something that is less likely to happen with an estate agent because they'd tell you who the owners were. But that isn't how we found this house. In our case, we went a step further. We'd seen that this house was abandoned and started to make some enquiries until we came across someone who knew the owners. And not only that, he was prepared to make a phone call on our behalf. Luckily for us, the house owners were interested in selling, so numbers were exchanged and we set up the first meeting to view. The house was habitable in some parts and other parts needed renovation, and still do for that matter. We'll put some links at the end of this video if you want to see more. Needless to say, we loved the house, and that's how negotiations started. It took 6 months to complete, but in our opinion, it was well worth the wait. If you really love an area, why not make some enquiries? We obtained a copy of the Caderneta Predial, or deeds as we would call them in the UK. We got ours from the vendors, but if you're interested in a plot, you can go to the finances or local tax office and ask for one there, but you'll probably need the reference number and some ID. The vendors hadn't lived here for many years, and all of the land was completely overgrown, so we couldn't access it. They pointed out the boundaries, or what they thought were the boundaries, from a distance. It borders with the main road, and that's the north, and parts of the road down here are to the west, so those are very clear and quite easy to see. So there's an entrance onto the land here from this smaller road, and it's fairly easy to see where the boundary is with the adjacent neighbours here. It's a wall border with the house on the hill, and following that a fence that runs all the way along to those trees in the distance there. Where the fence ends, there's this large stone wall, which also would appear to be a natural border, and on top it's terrace land that belongs to a different neighbour. That stone wall continued all the way here. It even gets taller in some places, and we could see that from a distance, but don't forget all of the other land in between was full of weeds, was full of brambles, ferns, you name it, it had it. So we couldn't walk on the land, we couldn't get access at all. But what we could see is this plot of land, which is right at the far side of this article. And we could see something different was happening here because it was being tended. And the vendors told us that all of this large field here was included. We call it the Lamero. And they told us that it ended where the tree boundary was. So that to us seemed fairly logical because it was connected to the upper fields. A few weeks before completion, we asked the vendors for permission to come and do some clearing on the land. We hadn't been able to see the land very well, and so we got a contractor in, and the contractor had a tractor and a mower. So they came in and they did all the areas where we've walked today, and when they finished everything up in the top areas, they came down into this section and started to cut. However, something strange happened. All of a sudden, there was this figure on the horizon jumping up and down and waving their arms and shouting, "Stop!"
Para, aqui não.
Just like that.
So stop we did, and we stop immediately.
So we met with the people claiming to be the owners to compare deeds, which were about as clear as mud. So whilst the property deeds tell you the essentials, such as reference number, who owned it generations ago, and a charming list of neighbours to the north, south, east and west, the actual on-the-ground situation can be, let's say, a little vague, and the boundaries marked by something or other. And the neighbours' deeds were just as bad as ours. None of this is helped by not having the correct maps, plans, or indeed the correct meterages. Anyway, it appeared to us that only part of the field belonged to the article that we were going to buy, and part of it belonged to the neighbour. However, the neighbour was trying to claim all of it. To cut a long story short, a deal was finally made between the vendors and this neighbour. to sort out the issue before completion of sale. And although it caused some delays, at least we had the clarity we needed, and now the whole field belongs to us. Before purchase, it's a good idea to walk the land with the vendors and preferably with the neighbours as well to make sure all the boundaries are totally clear. You can also check with BUPI, which is the digital land registry in Portugal. And I think I'll get Amilcar to explain what BUPI stands for.
I don't really know what it stands for, but
Let me help.
at the moment, Balcão Único do Prédio. Portugal at the moment is in the process of updating all this mapping, which will then again become much easier.
Traditionally, the caderneta predial, or deeds, just contained a written description. If you don't know who Senor Manuel is next door, and quite often that is somebody's great grandfather because the deeds haven't been updated, then it's very difficult for you to get to know who your neighbours are and what boundary issues there may be. Once you've bought the land and have the deeds, you can use the GPS mapping on BUPI to enter the details of your plot yourself. It's a good idea if it's not already been done, or you can get someone to help you. Imagine you found a piece of land that you fell in love with and bought it, and suddenly the land doesn't belong to you. Can that really happen? I'm afraid it can. There's a rule that exists that adjacent neighbours to rustic land have a preemption right to buy.
We've got two deeds. One deed is the agricultural land, which is about 1.2 hectares, and the other deed just besides it is the urban deed, which is the house we live in. You may have placed an offer and your offer of purchase has been accepted, but the neighbouring stakeholders have the right or the option to buy it.
The right to buy is to do with rustic agricultural or mixed land. It's not to do with urban land. The rule means that adjacent owners of agricultural or rustic land have the first option to buy land.
What is normally done in Portugal is to write a register letter to all the neighbouring landowners stating that land is now available for sale.
They're usually notified by registered letter and have 8 days to respond. If there's no interest, then the sale can legally go ahead. Now, if this procedure has not been carried out, you could end up purchasing the land and have challenges later on. So you should get your solicitor to check if it applies to you. In our case, we'd already got to know one of the adjacent neighbours, and we then decided we should go and introduce ourselves to the other neighbours, and you'll find that they're actually very friendly around here. In fact, during the process, we got offered a goat, a pig, and a chicken. No, that's not true, but we were offered a nice glass of wine and came away with half a dozen eggs. We learned that they weren't interested in buying the land that we wanted. In fact, some of them were considering selling their own plots of land at some point in the future. Although it's the seller's responsibility through their solicitor to check that the letters have been sent, it's really the buyer's problem if it hasn't. I'm just going to walk over to another part of the land, so follow me. Over here is a tank that is fed by a spring. And you can probably see that, as we said before, this is the boundary wall of ours and the neighbour. And this tank starts here, and it's really sitting in the neighbour's property. Now, in theory, it looks like it belongs to the other neighbour, and it probably does. But because historically there's been this allowance or connection of allowing water into our field, then it is a shared resource. We've spoken to the neighbour about this, and they say they never use the water from here because they have other resources like a well, and they've also got mains water. Down in between Amilcar's legs, you can see the
There is
wheel.
a big tap.
There's a big tap, And you can see that that is the one that we use.
But resources like this, water, sometimes there is like a stream that crosses the land or passes to the side of the land. And that's usually shared with other neighbors to the end of that particular channel. So usually it's like one Monday is for one, Tuesday is for another one, or they've divided per hours. Tends to be more related to water resources, but they could be as well an access through your land to somebody else's property. This is some things you need to find out and to make sure, even if you've got a good solicitor, that he's done that job. We never had issues on that side, but like everywhere else, there is always the good, the bad, and the ugly neighbor. So at the moment for us, they're all good. Perhaps some are a little bit ugly, but there's no bad ones yet.
So wherever you can, check for shared resource rights. It may not be an issue as such to you, but it could be very beneficial to you if you don't want to have any arguments with close neighbours. Most house purchases in Portugal are very straightforward, but I hope you enjoyed listening to our little story, and we'll see you next time.
And I hope you enjoy our story.
What about me?
You enjoy our story too.